The rain had softened to a gentle drizzle, the mist shimmering in the dim streetlight as they walked. The world around them seemed muted, as if wrapped in the rain's gentle embrace, with a faint scent of wet earth and old pavement filling the air. Broken newspaper stands leaned against the walls, streaked with rust and darkened by years of neglect. On the windows of an abandoned storefront, faded graffiti screamed obscenities and slurs, ugly reminders of the world they lived in. But there was something almost surreal about the scene, too, the rain washing everything clean, leaving an odd, aching beauty in the quiet street. So Susan began, her voice soft and melodic, lifting California's gaze. "You're from California? I mean, that's not just a nickname." California chuckled, her voice low and warm. "Born and raised, though I can't say there's much to tell about it." They passed under a broken streetlight, and Susan tilted her head, intrigued, her face half shadowed and half lit by the faint light filtering through the mist. "I've never been. I always imagine the beaches and sunshine. You know, the usual cliches." "Yeah," California replied, a grin tugging at her lips. "Something like that." She looked away, letting the conversation drift back to Susan, content just to listen to the soft lilt of her voice. A breeze swept past them, catching the raindrops in its path, and California felt her hand brush against Susan's. It was brief, the lightest touch, but it sent a tiny jolt through her, a warmth that pushed back against the damp chill of the rain. She resisted the urge to reach out, letting her fingers graze Susan's in that tentative way, each slight bump of their hands sending a rush of quiet excitement through her veins. They passed a boarded-up shop with a dusty awning, the faded colors barely visible beneath the layers of grime. Here and there, rays of sunlight pierced through the clouds, catching on the rain droplets like tiny prisms, casting the street in a soft, magical glow that made everything feel otherworldly, like a dream. California glanced over at Susan, who was staring ahead, eyes wide, her expression almost childlike as she took in the strange beauty of the moment. "Rain's different here," Susan murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. "Back home, it's just cold. Here, it's alive." California laughed softly. "Alive, huh? Didn't think I'd hear anyone say that about Riverside." She looked away, then back at Susan, her expression softening. "But, yeah, I get what you mean." Susan's smile widened, and for a second, California was sure she saw something flicker in her gaze, something like recognition, a quiet understanding shared between them. They fell into a comfortable silence as they walked, the rain pattering softly against their coats, every once in a while catching the golden glow of a street lamp, making the raindrops sparkle like tiny stars suspended in the air. California felt herself drawn to Susan's voice, the easy rhythm of her laughter, the way her words seemed to melt into the rain. She'd never been one for romance, had never allowed herself to think about what it would feel like to walk hand in hand with someone on a night like this. But here she was, feeling every inch of the warmth radiating from the woman beside her, each accidental touch sending little sparks through her. Their hands brushed again, this time lingering a little longer, and California's breath caught as she felt Susan's fingers curl softly around hers. It was tentative, almost shy, but it felt right, like something she'd been searching for without knowing it. They didn't say anything, just continued walking, hand in hand, through the rain-swept streets, leaving the broken newspaper stands and graffiti behind, finding something fragile and beautiful in the quiet, misty world they were creating together. The coffee shop was tucked away, nestled between two worn storefronts, and California felt a flicker of excitement as she reached for the door, holding it open with a small smile. Susan slipped past her with a quiet thank you, her shoulder brushing California's as she stepped inside. A warm, rustic glow filled the space, the flickering light from an old fireplace casting shadows over well-worn armchairs and shelves that sagged under the weight of dusty books. The smell of roasting coffee mingled with the faint mustiness of aging paper, like an old library steeped in the rich, earthy scent of fresh grounds. The air was thick with the warmth of the fire, wrapping around them like an embrace as they stepped further in. California took a moment to soak it in. The walls were adorned with antique knickknacks, faded photographs, brass trinkets, and shelves lined with mismatched teacups. An old phonograph sat in the corner, crackling softly with the faint strains of jazz, as if it were playing just for them. It was the kind of place that felt timeless, like it belonged to another era entirely. A safe little world far from the rain-swept streets outside. Behind the counter stood an older man with a kind face, his white beard trimmed neatly, and his eyes crinkling as he greeted them with a gentle smile. "Evening, ladies," he said, his voice warm and rough like the pages of an old book. "Make yourselves at home. Fire's warm, coffee's hot, and the company's good. What more could you want on a rainy night?" They ordered their drinks, and as the man prepared them, California glanced at Susan, taking in the way the soft light painted her features, accentuating the curve of her cheek, the warmth in her eyes. She could see her in this cozy place just as she'd imagined her among flowers. There was a beauty in the way Susan seemed to belong in any space that was filled with warmth. They took a small table near the fire, where the heat radiated through the room, bringing a soft flush to their cheeks. California cupped her hands around the warm mug, savoring the feel of it against her skin as she took a tentative sip. The coffee was rich, with a hint of cinnamon and chocolate, warming her from the inside out, lingering on her tongue in a way that felt indulgent, like a luxury she'd almost forgotten. "Wow," Susan murmured, cradling her own mug and looking around with a small, delighted smile. "This place is perfect." California nodded, taking in the space and its subtle magic, the way the firelight danced over the rows of books, the faint crackling sound filling the silences between them. "I've never been in a place like this. It's like an old book you'd find in the attic. Feels like it's been here forever, just waiting." They talked easily, sharing fragments of their lives, little pieces that slipped naturally into conversation. California mostly listened, letting Susan's voice wash over her like a song she could listen to endlessly. It was low and gentle, with a musical cadence that drew her in, making every word feel like a discovery. She asked questions, eager to hear more about Susan's world, painting a picture in her mind of her among rows of delicate flowers, sunlight spilling over her face as she arranged blooms with deft, careful fingers. "Anyway," Susan was saying, her fingers tracing the edge of her mug, "my mom started the floral shop. I grew up there, playing among the flowers. I didn't think I'd end up working there, but when she passed, her gaze softened, drifting into the fire. It felt like a way to keep her close, you know?" California nodded, her voice quiet. "Yeah, I think she'd be proud of you. You seem like someone who brings beauty into the world." Susan's eyes met hers, and for a moment neither of them spoke. The firelight reflected in Susan's gaze, and California felt a warmth settle over her, deeper than the fire's glow, something that stirred in her chest and left her feeling both vulnerable and alive. As the night wound down, the coffee cooling in their mugs and the fire burning low, California found herself reluctant to leave. Susan seemed to feel the same, her gaze lingering, her fingers tracing idle patterns on the table. "So, dinner?" Susan asked softly, her eyes twinkling with a hint of mischief. "How about tomorrow night? I know a little 50s diner, great milkshakes, and they've got an old jukebox." California grinned, her heart skipping a beat. "A real date, huh?" Susan's cheeks flushed, but she didn't look away. "Yeah," she murmured, a soft smile tugging at her lips. "A real date." The next evening, California arrived at the diner, her heart racing as she took in the vintage decor, black and white checkered floors, red vinyl booths, neon lights casting a warm glow over the room. Buddy Holly was playing softly in the background, and California felt like she'd stepped into another time, a place suspended between past and present. When she spotted Susan entering, she felt a thrill that only grew as Susan crossed the room, her smile lighting up the space in a way that made everything else fade. They slipped into a booth, ordering burgers and milkshakes, and California found herself caught up in Susan's laughter, the warmth in her eyes, the way she seemed to fill every empty space with something real, something that felt like it had always belonged. After dinner, a soft, dreamy tune began to play on the jukebox, and California noticed Susan's gaze drifting toward the small dance floor in the corner. Without thinking, she reached out, holding her hand open. "Dance with me?" Susan's smile widened, and she took California's hand, letting her lead her to the floor. They moved together, their steps slow, almost hesitant, as if testing the boundaries of the space between them. The music was low, wrapping around them, and California felt her heart pounding, every nerve alive with the quiet thrill of being so close to her. Their hands entwined, and as they swayed, California met Susan's gaze, her breath catching as she took in the soft curve of her smile, the warmth in her eyes. The world around them faded until it was just the two of them, wrapped in the gentle rhythm of the song. Without thinking, California leaned in, brushing her lips against Susan's, a tentative kiss that held all the longing and hope she'd kept buried for so long. Susan kissed her back, gentle but sure, as if she'd been waiting for this too. They pulled back slowly, their foreheads resting together, both of them breathing softly, their hands still clasped. California opened her eyes, and in that moment, she knew this was something real, something worth holding on to. In the soft glow of the diner, they held each other close, swaying to the music, letting themselves fall into the quiet wonder of a love they'd only just begun to discover.